Welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with host Lane Nordland.
Alrighty, friends, welcome back to another conversation here on the Cattlemen's Call podcast. I'm Lane Nordland, happy to be joining you here in podcast land, and I tell you what, it's a little cold across the nation here this week. That's because we're recording it during the 2023 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA trade show. And a lot of folks had a little bit of difficulties getting down here, but it was about 20 degrees below zero when I left home. So yesterday's 75-degree weather plus the humidity really made me feel welcome and a bit sticky. But we're down here, of course, having a lot of conversations with producers from across the nation. And today we're joined by Donnell and Tucker Brown of the R.A. Brown Ranch there in Throckmorten, Texas. And gentlemen, how were the roads getting over here to Louisiana this week?
Lane, it was a little slick when we left north central Texas. In fact, we were only 40 miles down the road when we lost control and slid off an embankment. Thankfully, guardian angels and good Lord looking over us were able to keep it on all the wheels and make it on to New Orleans.
So, Tucker, were you driving, or was your dad?
I was the driver there, and whether it was my fault that it happened or my
quick thinking
that saved it, I'll take the latter. But
absolutely, did a great job on black ice. It just all of a sudden happened.
Well, I'm glad you all made it safe here to New Orleans, and a lot of producers coming down here again. Helping set policy for the future of NCBA, but also taking in this trade show. 7 acres. It's pretty impressive to go down there and see that latest and greatest technology to help us out on our operations. And your family truly does have a historic operation in Texas. But, Donald, could you share a little more about the history of the R.A. Brown Ranch and just the role that it continues to play in having an agricultural legacy in Texas?
Absolutely. We are a multi-generation family business. I'm 5th generation. Tucker and his brother are 6th generation, and the 7th generation is on the ground. So we're thankful to be many generations of family working together on our ranch in Texas, raising what we love to say is cows, kids, and quarter horses.
And for yourself, Tucker, what's it mean to you to be the 5th generation and still continuing that, or 6th generation, excuse me, and continuing that legacy on and know that next generation is on the ground? Do you have kids, or is it your brother?
I do, yes. I've got a kid, and my wife might kill me, but calving, the due date will be for our second daughter will be in July, so we are excited about that.
That was really easy for me as well, using livestock, animal husbandry terminology when my wife and I were having our first child over a year ago, because it's way easier to understand some of that terminology.
It's our lingo, right?
And the doctor that we had grew up on a ranch, so she goes, this actually makes really good sense how we could talk in different terms, but I understood everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But our wives do kind of give us a weird look when we talk about that.
But to your question, it is an honor, and there are big shoes to fill. And the older I get, the more I recognize the wisdom that the past generations had, whether it's from my dad, from my granddad, and even more looking back at what they had to do and the vision of how far they were looking ahead to get it to where we are today.
And Donnell, for yourself, and I want to compliment you on the ranch's website. I went and looked at that, and I love history. And to go on your history tab and to see just the different years and those important milestones appear, I think that's what we need to do so much more of in agriculture, or just in family business in general, is understand that history, understand the challenges that we've all went through. And let's just talk about the history of the founding of the ranch, that first generation that decided to put a stake down, and what it means to share not only your agriculture story, but the history of your family as well.
Absolutely. And Lane, as we look back in so many things, challenge and hardship tends to drive innovation and new things. So as we look at our family business, our roots go back to Virginia. We're burned out in the Civil War. And so our family moved to Galveston, Texas, on the coast, became merchants in the cotton trading business, and then moved up closer to College Station, Texas, and started raising cattle and farming and horses and mules. We've got a letterhead from the 1890s of R.A. Brown and Sons, horses, mules, and polled Angus bulls. And so we've been in the equine and seed stock cattle production and commercial cattle production business for a long time. My great-great-grandfather was there at Calvert, Texas. His son moved to Fort Worth and managed one of the first commission companies at now the famous historic Fort Worth Stockyards.
I was there 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I love being down there.
Oh, it's a great place. Amazing history. And then with money made there at the stockyards in Fort Worth, he moved 120 miles west and bought land to start ranching where we are now in Throckmorten. And that's kind of how it all started.
And obviously throughout those years, there's been a lot of challenges that any producer will face. And we've been going through a lot of drought up in my country and across much of the West. I guess what are the conditions like the last few years on your operation, and what are some of the challenges but opportunities you've looked along the way?
Oh, we've being in our part of Texas, it always seems that there's a drought just around the corner. There's kind of a 10-year cycle, and the last one we had that was pretty rough was 2011, 12 right there, and we've seen that 10-year cycle come back around. Maybe not as severe, but definitely short on water, and so we have to be, just like my ancestors and past generations, we have to be forward-thinking of how we can best manage our land and our resources to get to the next generation. And with us keeping that in mind, that helps us make better decisions long term for the ranch. So the drought is something that we plan on, we talk about often. And Donnell, what would you add to that?
One of the unique things about our part of north central Texas, every environment has its challenges, right? No matter what part of the country or the world we live in, we all have our production environment challenges. One of the unique things about Throckmorten, Texas, is we don't have fresh underground water. Mm-hmm. So we're totally dependent on runoff. And when we go into an extended drought where we don't get significant running water rains for a period of time, man, that becomes a challenge. So in 11, 12, and 13, 70% of our ranch was without water. That was the third time in my lifetime that we've been 70% of the ranch without water. And when that happens, you have to move cows. You can haul feed for a while. You can't haul water very long. So we distributed cows into 5 different Texas counties, and we had cattle in New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, and Montana. Nebraska and Montana. We just scattered the herd.
You brought the drought.
We took the drought along with us to all those places. It seemed like, but thankfully it broke. And that's one of the challenges. And so we're dry right now. We're short on feed. We've had some wildfires recently, and all those things create challenges. But hey, all of us listening on this podcast today, we all have those things, and it's not a matter of are they going to happen. It's when and how do we adapt. How do we plan ahead for those, and how do we adapt after them?
And Donnell, looking back to the family that came before you and going through drought, what are some of those lessons you learned from history, especially like looking back to the 1950s when I know your operation went through a pretty severe drought too? How did that hard lesson help prepare for more hard lessons down the road?
Absolutely. One, I think being conservative, all right? Let's be understocked more than we're overstocked. Let's have diversity and have some of the livestock assets be more liquid than others. And so some of those are our elite nucleus seed stock herd that we absolutely want to keep together for the future of our production system. Mm-hmm. And then, we have some stocker cattle and some commercial cows that are much more liquid and less vital relative to their genetic value to the long-term vision of the ranch. So having that to where we can liquidate some of those things is important from a strategic standpoint.
Now, being a sixth generation, seventh on the ground, there's always that proud history, the lessons that we learned from our forefathers. But what was the mindset for your dad in terms of, looking back to the challenges, things we've done in the past to what we're doing here in the present to prepare for the future. Was there any resistance in, I guess, what was the dynamics like for those 6 generations in looking at how do we keep this ranch profitable and continuing? Has it always been a pretty open mind, continuing to respect the past and the traditions? What has that been like for your family?
I think respecting the past and embracing the future, seeking opportunities as we move forward, being progressive yet practical. I think those are things that keep us in line. Family and faith first is essential, and that we have to care for the land, and the land will take care of us. Those are the long-term focal points for us. As we've gone through the generations, I'm thankful that my family has always been very progressive in saying, hey, if you want to come back to the ranch, that's great, but pursue your calling. Seek what it is where you feel called to use your God-given gifts and abilities. And if that's part of the ranch, great. If it's different from the ranch, that's great too. We're going to love you no matter what. But you know, our family's been embracing in finding ways to utilize the gifts that each of us have to grow and expand the business, so that I'm pursuing a dream that I had that my parents helped plant and promote, but it's my passion that drives me to do that, and it's a little different than my parents. Tucker and his brother Lanham have different passions, just like my siblings and I. We went different directions, had different passions, but kept it under the R.A. Brown Ranch umbrella as different entities of the family business.
Yep. And so, Tucker, did you know you always wanted to come back to the ranch? I guess, what did you do after high school to prepare in having an experience maybe away from the ranch a little bit to truly appreciate all that is there in Throckmorten?
Yeah, so I knew I would be coming back for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and I think that was my mindset as I left, was that would be good times to come back, and the bull sale. But coming back to work on the ranch wasn't exactly on my radar. So I did, talking to Dad, he said, you can go to college, you can get into the workforce, but you have to leave the ranch for 2 years before I hire you back. And so I went and played basketball at a Division II school in Lubbock, Texas, Lubbock Christian University. And the cool thing about it is a completely different group of people than I'd ever been around. One that was more separated from agriculture than I was used to being at in Throckmorten, Texas. So I had to learn to communicate with a whole new set of people, which when I started thinking towards the end of getting my bachelor's there, as I start thinking about what am I going to do next, and thinking about my family, and more and more I was drawn home because I wanted my kids to be able to be raised the way I was. Just meeting with so many people that were separated from agriculture, as I have this opportunity and the family ancestry, and it would not be a smart move to not raise my family that way. Mm-hmm. So that's what brought me back. And I knew I needed to learn some more before I came back. So I went to TCU Ranch Management, and got married right when I came back to the ranch, and talked to Dad before I went to TCU. We both decided that was better for me to be more prepared to come home and be a part of the family business and help grow it. So that, but the cool part is that I learned to communicate with a whole different group of people, which I use a lot today.
You know, Donnell, we hear a lot right now that, especially with the drought, the state of the U.S. economy and whatnot, that, we don't want to go through another 1980s. And I think we'd all agree that the 1980s truly shifted family agriculture, because so many people did go through those hard times and had to sell out or just look for other jobs. And I look to my dad's generation. He would have graduated, I think, in 1981. And just how many of that generation of what would have been that next generation of farmers and ranchers were told, don't come home.
That's right.
And go get a job. And it took my dad. My dad was he was a fencer, contract fencer. He's built thousands of miles of fence. That's why I had to become to talk for a living to pay for my cows, because I don't want to tamp fence posts on somebody else's place. But I mean, he worked his tail off to be able to buy into my grandparents' place, take it over. Not a lot of people could do that though either. So how do you think that shift impacted U.S. agriculture today for the people that were able to go back at some point in the 90s or even later? And what worries you now as we go through today's world with the economy and drought and whatnot? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you bring up some really good points, Lane, in that, here I am, 54 years old. And yeah, there were a lot of people in my generation that, we grew up in that 80s era of high interest rates that took a lot of people down because they were heavy in debt. I think it's caused my generation to be much more conservative and try to do as much debt-free or with as little debt liability as we have to have. Man, interest rates have been really low. Those are rising. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't anticipate we'll get back to the high interest rates we had in the 80s. I just think we've got too much national debt that will keep our government from raising those interest rates to that level, because they got to pay interest on that as well. So that's one of the things I anticipate will keep them lower. But there's no doubt there's more opportunity today for the next generation to come into agriculture. And though it's a challenge to buy land affordably, to pay to cash flow it with agriculture production, I think we're going to have to be innovative in how we do that. And do we figure out ways for additional revenue from the ranching business, or do we work to leverage ourselves, our abilities, our passions to be great ranch managers and work collaboratively with people who have land but may not have the interest or the next generation that wants to come home and run that? And so are there ways that families where we can use sweat equity to have access to the land? Because one of the things, we've got to have land to run cows. That's just a given. So do we own the land? Do we lease the land, or do we figure out some kind of a way where we can work collaboratively with other people who own the land and want to keep that land, because it does tend to appreciate in value. It does tend to be a solid, firm, increasing value investment asset. I think that's where future opportunities will arise as we move forward.
Tucker, do you have any thoughts on that?
We visited a lot about that, probably more in the past year than we ever have. Just with change comes opportunity, and a thing that Dad always says that I really like, excuse me, is we don't have to change, but we have to compete with those who do, and I want to be that guy who is on. The guy who is willing to change to keep it going, because if we're doing thinking of our goal of keeping the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch, if we're making our decisions based on that, then we are continually seeing what's best and willing to change to do that.
And by the notes that Sarah put together so well, you can say I'm a tumbling tumbleweed, and I go off those talking points quite a bit, because I think this is truly just the conversations that so many producers are having, whether they are multi-generation, first generation, or just a few generations into it, and we're always looking at different ways of having different types of livestock production, and I think that kind of brings us back to more of your cattle production in our conversation today. Do you want to talk about just your family's role in running Hereford cattle in that part of the world?
Sure, yeah. My great-grandfather, R.H. Brown, was the first one to bring Hereford cattle to Throckmorten County. And it was neat. We ran Hereford cattle for years, and actually on my mother's side of the family, go back to the 1870s of raising Hereford cattle. Strong part of our heritage and our history, and those cattle really fit the time and the era when we needed cattle that were able to do it on their own, on the environment with limited nutrition, because we didn't have the infrastructure to deliver supplemental nutrition like we do today. And so those cows were on autopilot, and man, they did a great job.
So what is the state of the livestock operation looking like now? We've transitioned to some different breeds. Do you still run some Herefords with that plan out on the landscape?
So the neat part is I share a little quick history story in that my dad, Rob, and my granddad, R.A., my dad was the first one to graduate from college. My grandfather, R.A., went to Texas A&M and was there for a short period. His dad passed away, and he came home to run the ranch in his early 20s. So, that he was saddled with a big load of responsibility really quick. An awesome, beloved man, one of the original founders of the American Quarter Horse Association, and very conservative and very traditional. My dad, always innovative, always pushing the leading edge, sometimes the bleeding edge, actually. He was out so far on the cutting edge. And, he was taught in college that we need to be crossbreeding, utilizing hybrid vigor or heterosis, and planned crossbreeding systems, and that's where we really need to move to and go. And he came home from college, and man, his dad wasn't necessarily receptive. And there are many father-son relationships, or parent-children relationships where that happens, right? And this was one of those. And so my dad's ideas were squelched for quite a few years. So Dad continued to work hard and do what was best under the direction of his father. And a few years later, we droughted out in the 50s, and we ended up buying some land and leasing some more land 600 miles northwest of us near Lyman, Colorado. So my grandparents would go stay summers in Colorado at the ranch and love the cool summers. And we would always go to Colorado for a 2-week vacation in the summer. Well, it wasn't necessarily vacation for us, because we were always, hoeing weeds in the shelter belt and, fixing fence and that kind of stuff. But it was family time together. In 1965, at the end of that 2 weeks, or during that 2-week period, my dad and my granddad agreed on more things about the future direction of R.A. Brown Ranch than they'd ever agreed on before. And my folks were, this was before I was born, actually, but my folks were on the way home and found out that my granddad had had a massive heart attack and passed away. But in that 2 weeks, my dad and my granddad agreed to start crossbreeding. And I am confident that our ranch is where it is today because my dad received his father's blessing to go and use his mind, use sound science and technology to make things better. And if he hadn't had his father's blessing, I don't know that he would have gone and been such a trailblazer as he's been through the beef industry. So he embraced that. He was his sister was not interested. Her passion was other than the ranch, and so he leveraged everything he had to buy out his sister on a 40-year note, and he tried to use all the technology available and sound science to make the best cattle to pay for the ranch and keep it in the family. And, he and his sister, we all still have great relationship today, and we're thankful for that. But, God calls us in different directions, and that is okay. It's better to be where you feel called to be than to try and struggle outside of your gifts and be somewhere you're not.
Could you imagine being the mouse in the corner of the room, though, when your dad and grandpa were talking about that?
Exactly.
Like what that setting was like, and especially, my dad always throws one at me all the time. He says, "Did you learn that in college?" And I've said that a lot on this podcast. But how long do you think, they, button heads a little bit on just the ideas and implementing new things? Why do you think that was the time? What intervened right there for them to come together before that tragedy struck?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in divine intervention, and I think it was a God thing. I really do. But, I think my dad was more receptive to listen and learn and respect his father because of the 10 years of working at home under his direction and watching and learning and seeing, instead of just given free rein to go do whatever he wanted to do as soon as he came home from college. There's value in learning and value in patience. And since that time, we had Hereford cattle for over 100 years, and then my dad started crossbreeding, and man, we tried continental breeds. In my lifetime alone, we've worked with 17 different breeds on our ranch.
Wow.
Produced 17 different breeds on our ranch. And today we're focused on 3 breeds of cattle. We're focused on, I'm going to say, both colors of Angus, all right, Black Angus, Red Angus, and then Sim Angus, a continental Simmental Angus hybrid of both colors. That's our focus today. We have tried to not be married to any one breed, but try to produce what our customers want most and adapt to the changing needs of the market and what our customers need. And that's been the focus of what breeds we select. And then, of course, those breeds also are great users of artificial insemination, genetic progress, so we're able to make faster genetic progress with those breeds as well.
Now, Tucker, before we started recording, you mentioned that you wanted to start running some mini Scotch Highlanders to make it 18 different breeds, right?
My favorite, yeah. If it were up to my wife, we would probably have a handful of those Scottish Highlanders.
God, my wife wants a mini cow and a mini donkey, and I'm just like, you take care of them, that's fine.
Yeah.
You make sure their feet get shod. Especially the little that would be the one that I get like kicked in the head or something by like a mini donkey, trying to shape it up or something. But Tucker, for yourself, as you sit here, what are some ideas you've brought to the table that you've maybe had to advocate for a little more, or bring some more resources to the table to do something a little differently? Maybe it's clip and wire a little differently, or maybe it's livestock production. Could you share some of those thoughts?
Sure. Well, the cool thing is that Mom and Dad have been quite receptive. They are very open-eared. I'll say that about, sure, you have something, tell me. Here, do you have a plan? Let me see it. Very interested in hearing what I have to say. Also, I come in with the mindset of I don't have the power to tell the greats what to do. I always use it football terms. I love a quarterback mind, but I'll never tell Tom Brady where to throw it. And so I have that coming to my parents, is they know I trust their wisdom and what they do, so I come in with that. But a couple things that I've brought to the table that have maybe grown on them, the use of social media being one of them, using that as a tool of advocacy and marketing, and the time that we spend on it. Another one has my most recent kind of project has been working in the direct sales of beef, spending some more time and resources on making that happen. And it's a work in progress. It's been about a year, and it's taken some time and some budgets, and thankfully I haven't clipped enough wire to find out a better way. I've done my fair share. Yeah, I've done my fair share. I'll tell you that. But I am glad that their ears are open, and sometimes I probably, like most sons coming back to tell Dad what they learned at college, that I needed put back in my place.
And also, folks know you all for your quarter horses as well. And you talked about just having those different income sources and different ways to just be profitable. Let's talk about the quarter horse and its history on the operation.
So in the Civil War era, all right, in the 1800s, our family was in the horse business. And we were providing remount horses for the cavalry. And so horses has been in our blood for generations. We always loved riding good horses that are productive and practical, sound and functional and useful, with a lot of cow sense on the ranch. That's been our focus through the generations. So we enjoy that. We've had mare band, for generations and well over 100 years. My grandfather, R.A. Brown, was one of the original founders of the American Quarter Horse Association. My dad served on the board of directors and was, for many years, was president in 1997. My brother now serves on the board of the American Quarter Horse Association. So a long history, and we have registered at least one quarter horse every year since the very beginning of AQHA.
How many families have done
That's
that?
a pretty small number of folks that have continued to do that every year, and so we a lot of ties, a lot of history there. The focus has been, let's make sure we've got quality horses to do a better job of managing our cattle, and make sure our crews got good horses to ride that not only they can get the job on, but they can enjoy doing it. And then with that, we sell a few horses every year as well to customers. To share the joy of what we love to do.
And you touched on that, just utilizing horses still out on the operation. And I just think it's such a rich history and heritage, in CBA and the American Quarter Horse Association, because there are a lot of ranch. There's people got side-by-sides, I know, but we do everything that we can, pretty much everything horseback, because it's rough country.
That's right.
Where we're at. But how important is it from just working cattle, stress management on yourself and on cattle as well? How important is it to just keep that traditional aspect of it? And I know I say traditional because a lot of people look at horses as a traditional aspect, but it's still a 21st century tool out on your operation.
Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, like you said, your environment, there are places that a side-by-side can't get to and be productive in, and so the horses are a must for us. And so we're thankful to be able to have that and enjoy it. And man, I tell you, the horse business, the ranch horse business has really grown. And whether we call it the Taylor Sheridan Yellowstone effect or whatever credit we want to give to who, the horse market is thriving.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
No doubt about it. Whether it's team pinning or team roping or reining cow horse and stock ranch horse competitions, ranch rodeos. I mean, the demand for horses has gone up. So we're growing our horse program. And like my dad was very conservative. It was interesting that in cattle it was all about AI and embryo transfer, and let's use the most progressive genetics. And yet on the horse side it was all natural service. And we're going to go buy a great stallion and we're going to use him. And then when we've got enough daughters, we'll find a new stallion to bring. And now we're back with my wife Kelly and our younger son Lanham, that are taking our horse program to a whole new level and using the science tools of embryo transfer and artificial insemination to make amazing horses. And it's proven to be very beneficial. I mean, we've seen a huge increase in the value of our horses at our annual sale every October.
And so when you're marketing those horses, are you selling them as weanlings? Do you sell a few finished horses? I guess I haven't looked too far into your production of your horse sales, but could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, typically we sold weanlings. I mean, that was, let's provide horses, let's provide the raw materials, and let the cowboys grow them, develop them, and train them the way they want it done. And that's still a big part of what we market. But I think a lot of it depends on who you have in the family and on the ranch that has a passion to make good horses. So Lanham, that is a huge passion for him, and so now we're starting to get more horses that are 2, 3, 4 years old, some more that are ready to go and really make a great horse for somebody with the training already under saddle. And but you got to have the person that's ready to go do that.
Yep.
And so we still sell a fair number of weanlings, but selling more and more riding horses every year.
Well, and you mentioned just how hot the market is. I mean, I bought just a ranch horse here this year, and my dad said, "You paid what for that horse?" I said, "Well, I'm getting older. I can't be on a bronc every single time I get on, and I really, I can't be out there cowboying every day since I have to talk to pay for those cows and whatnot." But it just goes to show just what a different market we're in for horses as well. But you probably agree. You get older, it hurts to get bucked off.
Yeah, I've never asked for trouble when it comes to horses. It's funny because cattle and horses both, docility has become a major issue.
That's right.
Probably more than ever right now. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
But that you said that earlier, just that there's a lot of value in that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I just I need to just be able to saddle up and go out, do what I need to do, and not have to take a mile loop around the barn just to go out and pasture
Yeah,
there. But,
you know, and it's funny how our boys have different passions with, you know, Tucker really focused on the cattle production side of things, on beef sales and that side, and Lanham really focused on the horse direction. It's funny because Tucker says, I have horses so I can run cows, and Lanham has cows so he can work his horses. It really blends together well there.
It's always good to have someone do that day riding for you, and they're getting a lot out of it too. But,
That's right.
But, you know, I asked Tucker about, you know, him realizing coming home and just what he learned being away from the operation. But Donnell, for yourself and for your wife Kelly, what was that like coming home? Was it a quick transition? Were you working part-time outside of the operation? I guess what was that like when you were coming back?
Well, what Tucker shared a while ago about going somewhere else for a couple of years before you come back, I was just repeating what my folks told us. I remember as a freshman in high school, they sat me down and said, in 4 years, you can go to do whatever you want to do. Go to college, go to the military, go find a job, go rodeo, whatever you want to do. But whatever you do when you graduate, you're going to pay for it by yourself. We're going to give you a couple of cows, and we're going to help you run those cows here at the ranch while you're at school, and we'll always provide work. There's never we're never a shortage of work at the ranch. So they provided opportunity. And they said, if you want to come back, you can come back in one of two ways. You can come back and work for the ranch as an employee, or you can come back with a business plan to grow the family business, to make the pie big enough to feed another family. And so I'm the youngest of 4 kids. That's what all 4 of us did. We worked for the ranch for a while, and then when the time was right and the opportunity presented itself, we worked with Mom and Dad to grow the family business. They helped provide some collateral to make it happen, but our name was on the bottom line at full risk to make it happen. To make it happen not only financially, but to make it happen in reality with the workload as well. So it worked great. You know, you asked Tucker what he was going to do what he thought, you know, was he ever always going to come back to the ranch? I was going to go to Washington, D.C. and be a lobbyist. I mean, that's that. When I was in high school, that's what I was. I loved that. That's what I had planned to do. During a couple of years of travel with FFA, being based just outside of Washington, D.C. for a year, I learned that my calling was was more to the land and the livestock and the ranch, and to faith than it was in political leadership. Mm-hmm. So
isn't it weird? The older you get, the further removed some people do that dream. I thought I'd be governor of Montana by now, but I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. But you know, I'm very thankful for where we are and what we've done, and you know, Kelly and I worked for the ranch, and you know, one thing about Mom and Dad, they always incentivized us to grow our own business, because we were welcome to work for the ranch as long as we wanted. And Kelly worked part-time. She just worked 40 hours a week, and I worked 80 hours a week. And combined, we had a house and $1,600 a month. For 16 years, that was our salary. And, you know, it was an incentive to go and do more than just stay there and be an employee on the ranch, but to grow the business. And there was some lean times there, but it kept us from being complacent, mm-hmm. and it incentivized us to go and be progressive, and I'm thankful for that.
And that maybe leads into that next. I call it the awkward conversations about just generational planning, mm-hmm. ranch planning, buying into shares of that family business and whatnot. Well, what is that like, maybe between you and your dad and now your sons and other family members? What are those conversations like, if you're comfortable sharing that? And what are some tips you have for Tucker, folks your age, how they mm-hmm. need to listen, be receptive or whatnot, or just tips to that generation that has just maybe took over management 10 years ago, and now they got to start planning for their kids as well?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, that conversation was always good, because my great-grandmother actually was very progressive in estate planning, and actually used an estate planning tool that's not even available today, but she was able to will the ranch and skip 2 generations without tax consequence. Again, that loophole is closed now. But, I think the key is to find professionals that help us use the tools that are available to, as my mom and dad put it so eloquently, we're striving to keep the ranch in the family and the family in the ranch. And they've done a great job. They started planning before we did our generational transfer now 10 years ago, in 2013. For 30 years, they had been giving away part of the ranch to equally to each of us 4 kids. We weren't taking any dividends. It was still mom and dad's ranch. It was on paper so that if something happened, God forbid, to mom and dad, that we were able to lessen the tax consequence, where it seems like the government wants us to buy the family business from our ancestors every generation. And I don't think that's right. So we strive to lessen that tax consequence as much as we can.
So Tucker, what's it been like being back on the ranch and having these conversations at the kitchen table with your folks, with your wife, with your brother, with other relatives? What's that experience like? And as I mentioned before, what are some tips that you have for people that are ready to have that conversation and why they need to have that conversation with their family?
Yeah, that we all know it's a hard conversation to have, because in a roundabout way, we're saying, so when you die, what happens?
That's pretty awkward.
Yeah. That's hard.
That's why I call it the awkward conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's so important. We've seen in the past, 5 years, how many historic ranches, family-owned ranches, have we seen sell? Whether it was because of generations separated that did not come back to the ranch, or family fighting against each other, that's heartbreaking to see that happen. And again, that kind of goes back to the goal of what Rob and Peggy said of keeping the ranch in the family. And not only that, but keeping the family in the ranch. So having that conversation isn't always obviously easy, but if it's something you care about, it has to happen. It needs to happen, or it's only going to cause trouble. The way that I think really helps is by having that conversation off of the ranch. And I think that's part of the reason that that Rob had great conversation with his dad about crossbreeding away from home. And so whether it's at Chili's or whether it's
Is that where you guys do yours is Chili's?
No.
During happy hour?
Yeah. Whether
2-for-1 apps.
Exactly right. So whether it's at Chili's, whether it's at on the way to a sporting event, off of the ranch is where I believe really good conversations happen. The most people are most receptive about it. I think that's where a lot of great brainstorming happens. So away from the ranch, away from home, out of the comfort zone, and I'm a brainstormer. I think it runs in the family, so I have a lot of fun of thinking about it and talking about it. And so that's talking about the future is a really good way to move into that conversation, saying, hey, 10 years from now, I have these goals. How can we get there? And then what does it look like? What can we do to keep this in the family? I think is a better way than saying, so what does your will say?
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's a great idea and so true, getting out of our comfort zone relative to our home environment. And so a lot of our conversations happen behind the wheel of the pickup. I mean, that those road trips, especially in the places that don't have cell phone coverage, are great to have that conversation. And I think, not only planning, but I'm a believer in making the right thing easy and the wrong thing uncomfortable. You said the awkward conversation, and that so well describes it for both sides, all right, for the parent and the children. Because I've seen it now from both sides. From a child, I'm like, I want to talk about what's next, but I don't want to talk about the immortality of real life and appear to be disrespectful to my parents, right? Yep. And then as a child, as a parent, I don't want to burden my children with any sense of expectation that, hey, you got to come back and run this ranch. because I don't want them to have that burden. I want them to go pursue their calling of what they feel called to do and what their true calling is in life. And if that's part of the ranch, great. If it's something else, that's great. I remember Tucker and I took a road trip, and I think another advantage to road trips is going somewhere to visit other ranches. Brainstorm with other people. What have they done? That helps start when you hear some other people talk about it, it helps foster that conversation for yourself. And I think also more one-on-one, if it's father and child, or mother and child, or daughter and dad, or son and mother, whoever, but that one-on-one conversation to get it started seems to really help, instead of, hey, let's have a family meeting with all the siblings and all the in-laws and all the grandkids, and we'll talk about the future of the ranch and what's going to happen one of these days. Yep. Make it easy. Start it simple. Road trip. Go visit someone else. Start that conversation. I think that's a big help.
What were you two talking about when you went off the road this week then? I mean, that must have been one heck of a conversation. If that's,
the conversation really, because you realize your immortality, the conversation since then has been very much about planning for the future. How's that?
Yeah. Oh, I just had to throw that one
but,
in there.
Hey, I do remember a trip Tucker and I took. We went to Florida Cattlemen, Tucker, and I'm trying to remember when that was. 2014, almost
13.
10 years ago. All right,
Probably
so about
10
years ago. He was in college trying to figure out, all right, what am I going to do next? We went and visited several big ranches in Florida and all those good family friends, and they were, well, Tucker, I guess you're headed back to the ranch. And I could sense, Tucker's response was, yeah, that's kind of what it looks like, or something along those lines. But I could sense that there was I'm not sure what I'm going to do or what I'm supposed to do. And I remember that night we sat down and over dinner, and I said, son, it seems like there's a burden, and I don't want you to feel any weight of responsibility to come back to the ranch. You go do what you feel called to do for however long, and if that includes the ranch or doesn't include the ranch, it's okay. And it seemed like there was this huge weight lifted off of his shoulders, and it was a relationship changer for us, because it took away what seemed to be a burden and created an opportunity.
And as we look at those opportunities for the future, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like as the family comes together, plans for the future, enjoys different aspects of agriculture, bringing that profitability, sustainability conversation into it? What are your individual goals, and what are the ranch's goals?
Well, you talked about that sliding off the road on the way here in this 14-hour road trip. Since that, we have been asking ourselves exactly that question. What is, and so yesterday I challenged my wife and both of our sons and me as well, to share what's our vision for the ranch: 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and 30 years. Where do you and your family feel called to be? Where do you see, what would you like to see happen with the ranch? What are some different possibilities or avenues? And what are some things you don't want to see? And I think those are important questions to ask. We just found out we're in search to replace our ranch foreman. He's done an awesome job for us for several years, but he felt called to move back to his home country and be closer to family. And so as we're searching for that key employee of our family business, it's causing us to reevaluate, okay, how does our core business look? And with Tucker being a part of the ranch, Lanham being part of the ranch, Kelly, all of us working on the ranch, is now a time to shift and adjust the roles and responsibilities and focus that each of us have to redirect the ranch and where we're headed.
Tucker, what are your thoughts on that?
It is funny that this is kind of right on time of us brainstorming about that. And so what my granddad and dad have built on seed stock bulls has been incredible, and the reputation that they built is huge. And so the shoes to fill are huge, and to keep setting goals is the only way that I feel that my brother and I can keep that reputation going. Personally, in 10 years from now, I mean, I do love being on the ranch, being a part of the ranch. I think that keeps me grounded and keeps my mind on my family and the way that I want to raise my family. I love this whole movement towards, we talked about it earlier, whether it's the Yellowstone effect or what, but people want to know about the American rancher, the cowboy way of life. And in ag, we have tended to be pretty quiet about our lifestyle, and that's okay. A lot of people like that. And now that we have this push of, hey, let's tell our story, but most of us don't know how. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to learning how to communicate with this new set of people that I'm using now, and through social media, through speaking, through podcasts, of sharing that story and building a sense of trust between the consumer and the rancher. And I've had a lot of fun with that. I see being more involved in that, whether it's always being an advocate for agriculture, but a spokesperson between the consumer and the rancher, but also always being on the ranch is one of my goals.
You both have mentioned that Yellowstone effect, and I guess I have a different view of it being from Montana. But I guess how individually on the ranch or just when you're out and about, how has that Yellowstone effect had a positive impact on people's because it's a TV show. We understand that.
Mm-hmm. It's entertainment.
It's entertainment, but how has that show provided kind of a glimpse into the Western way of life? It almost seems that people, and I think COVID really highlighted it, people wanted to get away from the city. They kind of yearn for that that way, that rural lifestyle almost, and seeing that, the grocery store is out of food.
Yes.
I guess, what have been some of those positive interactions? Like last night, I'm sitting outside, we're downtown trying to get in to eat, and two guys walk up and say, "Oh, Yellowstone, cowboys." And I'm like, do not say we're from Montana. I don't need that. But I guess what are some of those positive things? Like I said, for us, I see some negatives just because people are moving to Montana because of it. They're buying their ranchettes, driving up rangeland costs.
Oh, yeah. Right.
But what are some positives that you both have personally seen from that?
It's given me more opportunities than ever. Well, I think what it's done actually is it's moved the mind of people to be curious about it. And they want to ask somebody they trust. And that goes back to that building the trust between the consumer and the rancher. But I have gotten more questions about, hey, does this really happen? Does a calf get pulled and get up and run off? Is that what happens?
I watched up until that first episode there or whatever, and I'm like, I'm done. But
which
I've had a more open mind now. But.
Yes, and when we see it, we're like, oh, that's not real. But it has given me many more opportunities for people to be open-minded about asking me that question. Yep. And in the moment when people ask us that, we have to remember that we're the face of the industry in that moment. From what we say. From what we say to that person, we are representing the entire beef industry. So that has been one of the positives that I've loved. I've actually not watched it. Not because I don't like it. I haven't. I should. I know about the train station. I just haven't seen it.
See, everyone says that. I'm assuming somebody gets knocked off or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I wish actually our calves did get up and run off.
It'd be handier, wouldn't it?
Calf.
Yeah.
Just dried off, ready to go. Because I did watch a few episodes of the first season. But Donnell, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on just having I guess that opportunity to have a conversation with someone that truly wouldn't even consider where their food comes from or just that Western way of life?
Yeah, that's right. And it's been neat since Taylor Sheridan bought the 4-6's ranch. It's not far from us, and I've gotten an opportunity to know him personally. It's been neat to see his vision and his goal, and he there's no doubt he's a talented person that does an amazing job of writing television entertainment. I wish it didn't have the language because that's not language we use on the ranch. But other things that happen that don't happen on the ranch. But I think it has created more passion and some appreciation for land ownership and property rights and food production that I think was is beneficial and is necessary. As we have a growing global population and more people that didn't grow up with manure on their boots, didn't grow up with a real-world understanding of food production and ranching, I think it's giving them a glimpse into our world. You're right, it's driving up land prices. Here's my opportunity with that. Here's what I see, is that I see people buying ranches because they've fallen in love with ranching, but need guidance. And I think that's where people like our family, like Tucker and other families like ours, can go in and say, hey, let us help you manage your ranch, okay? Let's tie our horses together. You've got this ranch. Let us come in and we can help manage that ranch for you, provide the genetics. We're looking for places to raise embryo calves. And so work with ranches and we can provide the labor management to do the synchronized part, and then it's about raising the calves just like they'd do otherwise. So I think there's opportunity in that, and I'm excited about the future as we move forward.
You know, I am curious. Obviously, all of us have watched Lonesome Dove or read Larry McMurtry's books as well. That would have came out, 89, 88,
Sounds
89.
right.
I would have been a twinkle in my dad's eye at that point. I would have came a little bit about 91 is when I came into the world. But was there a Lonesome Dove effect?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, but because it was one extra long movie, you know, it wasn't the continual impact of people and wondering the anticipation of what's coming up on the next episode.
You know, one thing that the books of Lonesome Dove, it made it really came clear is those Texans weren't very tough and they couldn't survive in Montana.
That's so true. No, that is so true.
They all
We're
left or
pretty
died.
thin-eyed.
No. But I'm glad to get that perspective from people that aren't in Montana, because you know I have friends that farm and ranch and they're avid watchers. I think I have farm and ranch friends that watch and don't tell anybody. I will say we did watch the 1883 series. Yeah, it was pretty good. The one time they're like drowning in the creek, and I'm like, creek. Sorry, we say talking like a Canadian here. And I'm like, you literally could stand up. But again, I'm like, it's an entertainment value. Like I said, but I really do appreciate that perspective on it, because it does open a dialogue with producers and consumers. Hey, we're coming up on an hour right here, and I know I want to let you take in the convention here, but what are some just thoughts that you would just like to share with producers out in the countryside, or if they want to reach out to you and say, hey, what are some tips you have one-on-one with me just about how I can have that awkward conversation with my family? Just what are some closing thoughts? I'll give you both the floor.
Well, I think as we move forward, like Donnell said, there's a growing population that loves beef. The demand for beef is high, and that is a product that we all have. So that's a good thing. The future's bright, and if we are willing to change with it, to go with the flow, to know that the drought is coming and plan for it, we're right there with them. I mean, we're right there. We talked about so many opportunities that when things do change or go bad, it opens up another door, and we just have to take it. And it's not easy, but for people in my generation, I think that there's a lot of responsibility to be the middleman of connecting the consumer to the rancher and continuing to get better. Because if we're not listening to our consumer, then we've seen demand shrink before. But when we do listen to the consumer, that demand stays high, and it has been that way for a long time. And I think the future's bright.
I think it's important to develop a vision statement or a mission statement for where you want to go. Kelly and I got married 32 years ago. We came back to the ranch, and we after it had been away for 6 years, and we said we built a mission statement that says we're continually striving to improve the efficiency of converting God's forage into safe, nutritious, and great-tasting beef to better feed His people. And that has been the underlying focal point for us in the decisions that we make. That's where we all those decisions, we want it to lead that direction. With that, our number one goal is to improve our the profitability and the sustainability. There's a word that 30 years ago many people didn't use, but 30 years ago, improve the profitability and the sustainability of our customers through our genetics and our service. So I think those are keys to find those. What are those? Where am I headed? What's that focal point? Find that and set some goals. I was also challenged in my 20s to set some goals for my life. And those, I had set 4 goals. They're still the same 4 goals today. That 4th one is to produce the most efficient beef cattle in the entire world that have superior flavor. And that's still the direction we're going today. My other goals were more personal. I want to be healthy. I want to have joy. I want to be the best husband and father that I can be. But more important than any of those is that I want to go to heaven when I die and help as many others know the way, the truth, and the life. And to me, there's nothing more important than those things. But as we move forward at R.A. Brown Ranch, I'm excited about embracing the future. I look forward to those road trip conversations with our children, with our family, and their spouses, and the next generation to decide, where do we go from here?
Well, I've enjoyed this. It's been an hour. It doesn't feel like an hour.
No, it's been great.
I've enjoyed this, and I hope we can follow up with you guys, too, down the road. I think it'd be great. Maybe I'll come down the operation.
We welcome you anytime.
Yeah, Sarah, let's go down there.
Throckmorten's a great place.
Yeah,
Come on, the metropolis.
But, no, I tell you what. Well, you know what? If you guys have more of these awkward conversations about ranch planning and everything, if you do want to follow that calling, I'm sure Ethan has a few openings out in the DC and CBA office if you wanted to go intern there, maybe.
There you go.
Should your dad go intern there?
There
as a
you go.
lobbyist?
That'd be good for you, Pop.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, check out their website. Is it just
RABrownRanch.com.
.com. I because sometimes you don't know if it's .org, .net, whatnot.
Right. Yeah, and social media too. We'll be on all the socials.
Well,
Hey, Tucker's all over the social media deal. TikTok and Snapchat and all of those, YouTube. I mean, well, it's cool. Today you got recognized as Beef Advocate of the Year by NCBA, and we're big supporters and fans of NCBA and appreciate all the leadership of our volunteer leaders and staff.
thanks for bringing that up. I didn't write that down on my list, so thanks for reminding me about that. But yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, again, gentlemen, safe travels when you head home. Hopefully this weather lifts a little bit, but maybe it'd be great to be a mouse in the corner of your pickup listening to that conversation and what the future has. But again, thank you to Donnell and Tucker for joining us here today. It's a great time here at the Cattle Convention, and no matter if you're listening to this podcast right when it comes up or down the road, these are lessons that we can all live by. Friends, thanks for joining us here on the Cattlemen's Call podcast. I'm Lane Northland. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with Lane Nordland. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.